I think we're very fortunate and we welcome Don this afternoon. Before Don starts, though, I'd like to lead us in a short reflection. Lord, you give us today 1 minute at a time. That's all we have, all we ever will have. Give us the faith that believes each moment asks us to trust you, even as you trust us. Give us the hope that holds within each moment, despite pain or doubt or fear, an anticipation of eternity. Give us the love that transforms each minute of our lives into a reflection of your forgiveness, mercy, and goodness. Amen.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Let's try it one more time. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. All right, good. I know we're after lunch. I don't take that lightly. Some of you maybe didn't have lunch, so I don't take that lightly either. And I don't take lightly that you've given up your time. So I will try to make the best use of our time together to learn some really key things on this topic. In order to learn, I want you to be comfortable. Don't worry if you make crunching sounds while you're eating. Maybe have your phones on vibrate. But if you have to answer a call or something, just go do that. All right? If you all get up one at a time and go out and don't come back, I'll know this isn't going as well as I had hoped it would. When I talked to Paula, and Paula, thank you for your kind words. When I talked with her about this, one of the themes that came to mind from listening was the one that I chose for a title. Are you doing well while you're doing good? Are you doing well while you're doing your good work? And I think that's an important phrasing. It's not just a coincidence that I picked that, or it wasn't a throwaway line. When you think of our mission statement, through our exceptional healthcare services, you and I, reveal the healing presence of God. That is not a light order. That is a very tall order. And in our profession, when you look at the research that's in the healthcare profession around people who thrive in this work, people who struggle in this work, one of the challenges is to be able to do our work with as much focus as possible in a very tenuous environment, and to do it without resentment, and to do it without resignation. And when I thought of this presentation, I thought of my wife, Mary Ann, who's a nurse who has survived life-threatening illness. And who one of the reasons I love her is for that, for her resiliency, her ability to bounce back. But also, I've observed her as a nurse. One thing I've learned from her as a person who has no clinical background. My academic background is in theology and in organizational psychology. And that makes me a fountainhead of useless knowledge. Mary Ann calls me Cliff from Cheers, the letter carrier guy. She says all the time, you don't really know anything worthwhile or marketable that helps our family. You're just kind of a useless source of information. She married me anyway, thankfully. But being around her, one thing I've observed is when she takes call. She is now a parish nurse, but most of our marriage she has been a nurse at the University Health Center in St. Louis, in medical intensive care, in neuro ICU, in surgical ICU, in the emergency room. And when she would take call, I would notice that frequently, you get that sigh when you hang up, like I was hoping I was off Saturday, or I was hoping. And she would frequently say, I'll be fine because I'm on with Andre, and I'm on with DeMarco, and I'm on with Kelly. I remember these names. I'm on with Artricia. And what she was saying was, I'm on working with these people who are not going to make it worse by their presence. They're only going to make it better. And you may feel that way with certain people. You may catch yourself without even thinking about it. You're on a super busy day, but if you see someone coming down the hall who you hold in high regard, you'll stop for 10 seconds to say hi to that person. Or you'll look at the list when you're on call and say, this will be all right because I'm on with these individuals. You might have other times you look at the list and you say, this is going to be a very interesting day when I get to work, okay? So how do we get to where we are those kinds of people? How do you build on what you already have? I would submit that it's hard to last in this field very long unless you are resilient. And the term resilient meaning, how do people bounce back? How do you, I saw this when my dad was in his final days of his life. I was amazed that even after my dad died, in the moments following his death, the nurse who would come in and attend to us and say, do you need anything else? We were waiting for one of my family members to arrive. And she'd go back out and take care of other people on that center and then come back in and be present to us. And even in that grief, it really struck me that she was so adaptable. And I caught myself thinking, how does a person do that when that happens with some regularity? Maybe not every shift, but many shifts where we were, death occurs. So I want you to, if you will, raise your curiosity about that. Think when we go through this presentation today about people with whom you work who have these kinds of qualities. And think about how you can become even more that kind of person for others, okay? Every once in a while I'm going to ask you a question. I was teasing the people in front that sit here, they're going to get called on a whole lot, and didn't even make them nervous. They're very resilient and they didn't move. But I will ask you once in a while to say, you know, what do you think about what I just said? Or I might even ask you, depending on things, to talk to a person next to you, but I won't call on everybody, all right? I want us to realize a lot of the learning is in the room, though. It's not just here. Okay. So, for starters, I love these two quotes. Gus Lee wrote a book that he titles Courage, and he profiled all kinds of people. He profiled people in political life who were part of the demise of the Berlin Wall, part of the demise of communism in the latter half of the last century, who worked politically toward that end. He profiled people who have gone through chemotherapy in his research. He profiled people who raised their grandchildren after a person's daughter and her husband were killed in an accident. And he started talking about what characterizes people who do things like that. And he said over and over in his book and in a number of his articles, we are meant to cross rivers. Okay. When I first read that, I thought about trying to cross a river in Colorado. When I went with a couple of my buddies some years ago, and we took horses on this trail and had to go across a river where the water starts coming up to the base of your feet, like where the saddle stirrups are. And as you can imagine, with my build, I am really good for riding horses. These long legs of mine make it so easy to navigate on a horse. And going across that river, I remember thinking about this quote. I did not feel comfortable in the middle of that river. I did not feel like I was meant to cross rivers. I felt like I was meant to get tossed off and float down a couple miles and hope somebody finds me. Okay. So that image made a lot of sense, but he says we're meant to do that. Okay, we're meant to cross the emotional rivers, to cross the challenging rivers that we have. And my favorite, Helen Keller, who knows everything in her life now, her life after this life, who better could say something like this? The world is full of suffering. And if you read the paper in the morning, if you turn the news on when you awaken, you know that the world is full of suffering. It's full of suffering. On the wrong day here, the world is full of suffering. People who have illness, people who suffer because they have to tell us, I can't pay this bill. People who suffer because they realize their life's going to change with the diagnosis of one of their loved ones. So our world can be full of suffering. And yet, she added, it's also full of overcoming suffering. And I would bet, if I ask you that, you know people in your own lives who have done that. You've probably done it yourself. You've seen patients do that here. And when people have a purpose, they can accomplish anything. I'll tell you this neat story that occurred in Oklahoma City. We have a hospital there called Bone and Joint Hospital. So by its very name, it implies orthopedic procedures and so forth. And I was there for a meeting, and before I left for the airport, one of the nurse managers said, would you like to come up and see this new center that we renovated, the Total Joint Center? Yes. So I go upstairs, and like any of you who are in nursing leadership, when can you ever walk on a floor and not have somebody ask you for something as soon as you arrive? So when she gets there, a couple of her employees said, we'd like to talk to you about something, and she proceeds down the hall. And I'm waiting on this patient floor, and I hear from this room someone say, hey, I want to get out of here. I'm supposed to be discharged afternoon. Hey, I'm supposed to get discharged afternoon. I look at my watch and it says 12:12. Okay? So I'm already dealing with a very patient individual. Okay? And then the voice says, you, little gray-haired guy out in the hall. Blue shirt, red tie, blue sport coat or whatever I had on, so there's no hiding. And I thought, well, I don't know anything. I won't say the wrong stuff. I can't do that much damage. And I went in to say hi to him, and what occurred to me was something I read from a person who works in palliative care, who said, when you're dealing with people, ask an unscripted question. Okay? Ask an unscripted question. And in her experience in palliative care, this person said, we're always asking, what are their vital signs? What are their weight since the last time we saw them? How is their pain under control? What medications are they taking? What reactions do they have? Is their family in town? Is the family supportive? Very pertinent questions. But she said, what happens when you ask an unscripted question of a person? Like, where was the neatest place you lived in your life? What was the thing you loved doing most when you weren't at work? Did you ever have a hobby? What's the thing you love to do the most in your spare time? It's an unscripted question that will yield a ton of things. So it occurred to me when I went in, instead of saying, I'm sorry that you're upset, I don't really know anything, I don't work here every day, trying to weasel my way out of it, I just said, you really sound like you're ready to go. Why do you want to get out of here? Well, there's a risk somebody's going to say, well, moron, because I want to go home, and, that kind of thing. But instead he said, I want to get out of here. I have my new hip, and my daughter's getting married in 2 months, and I want to walk her down the aisle. He has a reason for doing what he's doing. He also said, my wife's been gone for 2 years. She's been dead for 2 years. She's buried on a little hillside in this town outside of Oklahoma City, and I've not been able to get up to her grave because of my condition. And now that I have my new hip, I want to get there. Okay, so now, suddenly, it's a very different encounter. Okay, he's talking about overcoming suffering, physical suffering, and overcoming the suffering of departure, the departure of his wife, and wanting to let his daughter go, give his daughter away, as we say. Okay? He also, at the end of it, said, I got to tell you, I learned a new word when I was here, which is also very risky. Like, I wonder what one of our employees said when they were lifting him or something like that. And I said, what's the new word? And he said, ambulate. He said, do you know what that means, young man? I was like, that's great. I haven't been called young man in like 35 years, so I'm all in. I said, I think I know what ambulate means. What do you think it means? And he said, it means hurts like hell. Because whenever they told me the first couple days they were going to ambulate, it hurt like hell. And I thought, well, we got to work on pain management, but he's there. He has a reason. He's become resilient because he has a reason. Okay? Think about what it is that makes you go forward on the day when you say to yourself, they don't pay me enough for this nonsense. And don't you have days where you say that? They don't pay me enough for this nonsense today. Okay? What is it besides the fact that I need an income? I'm helping pay my mortgage. I'm helping my kids get through school, whatever it is. Okay? And once we identify those things, Nietzsche, the philosopher, said, once you've identified your why, you can endure any how. Once you've identified why you do what you do, you can go through any how of getting there. You can get through it. Okay? Good. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I love this quote on the right. Frederick Buechner is a theologian who talks about what it means to say you have a calling. And sometimes you may say, I really feel like this is my calling to do this now. Or I feel like it's my calling to be a Sunday school teacher. It's my calling to be a volunteer at this or this. I feel kind of called to my job, fortunately. And he says that's when your deep purpose or your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. So if you're on a phone with somebody who has to tell you, I can't pay this bill, think of what they're hungering for. And they're hungering not to be dismissed. They're hungering not to be seen as less than us, because they don't have employment or they don't have insurance. And are you able to derive a deep purpose or a deep gladness from that? And when we look at our profession, Antonio Botana is an educator, Christian brother, Order of Christian Brothers. And I was working on this presentation a little while ago at home one night and had this on the dining room table, and Mary Ann was looking at it with me and saying, well, and she said, what's this big circle from? I said, it's this guy Antonio Botana. And she thought I said Antonio Banderas. She's like, that guy wrote that? And I go, no, I don't think so. Okay. And as a really reassuring thing, she was sitting in like a recliner chair across where I was doing this, and I was talking all about the presentation, and I looked back over like 5 minutes later, and she was asleep in the chair. Which is a real confidence builder when you're putting a presentation together and your wife is conked out listening to it. Botana says we may have come into a profession like healthcare and say this is a great occupation. When I entered healthcare without a clinical background and began to work in setting up health outreach for people and clinic development, I heard people say stuff like, that's a great profession, you'll always have a job. And I got laid off 18 months later. It became the pathway for me to get to SSM. And so now I feel very grateful for that 20 years ago. Okay. But we may enter this and say, well, on our worst days, we say this is just a job. Okay. Up here, he said, of course, we look for credentials. You know, are you ACLS certified? Do you have your bachelor's? Do you have your master's? Do you have all these certifications? Those are important. But he said, what if you don't have this? And if this sense of calling doesn't grow, it becomes very, very difficult to do work. We tend to get stuck just over on the less satisfying side. And obviously we need credentials. Obviously we need that. I'm not saying we don't. But I want to, as time goes by, I want us to understand this more. All right, first thing. I'm going to go through 5 things kind of quickly, okay, that I think help, these are my observations, that help people to be, and they're on your handouts. If you don't like those handouts, those are great birdcage liners. They fit right at the bottom of the birdcage. The first one is pay attention to what's going on inside. Let's do one quick exercise. Put your hands on if you know how to take your own pulse, do that. Just put a couple fingers at your wrist. And just close your eyes. And see if you can tell either by that touch or listening for your heartbeat. And now take a slow, deep breath. This is the opposite of being at the beach. This is where you want your gut to go out as far as possible when you exhale, okay? This is where we hardly ever breathe like this level, at this level. So do it again. I'm going to be quiet. Slow breath. And when you exhale, say, I am calm. Do it one more time. Breathe as you exhale. I can manage this. Okay. All right, come on back. I don't want you to do this too long or you'll all nod off. Okay. All right. Just beginning to notice how we are doing. I notice when I am agitated and excited, I can tell my heart rate is up. And if I'm not careful, that hijacks the rest of my emotions. You know, that can really take over our emotions. And we begin to allow that to go on unchecked. And if you do, it's physically not good. And I think it also helps us, it makes us fail to understand how we can manage situations. So the first thing, to help slow that down, and I recommend you do this. I met an emergency room manager who said, I tell my nurses before they go in to see a patient in a room, every time, Or if they even go into a divider, to put their hand on the wall and say, be present. Be present to the patient. It makes them slow their motor down and get focused. Okay, how do we get focused? The Inner Roommate, from a guy named Michael Singer. He wrote a book about meditation, and when I read it, I thought, okay, he's going to teach some of this stuff I mentioned. He's going to teach ways to pray, ways to be still, which he does. But he also talked about something called the Inner Roommate. And he said it's that voice inside of you that if this were another person who spoke to you this way, you wouldn't live with that roommate. All right? So here's an example. I say, you know what, I think I'm going back to school. I'd like to go back to school. I'm 42 years old, and I'm ready to go back to school. I think I'm kind of ready to do that. And your inner roommate says to you, you're going to go back to school? You didn't do so hot the first time. You went like 7 years to college and barely made it out. And you think you can do that now? You got some kids at home? I don't think you're the brightest bulb around anyway. Okay? If our roommate said that to us, we would say, why don't you mind your own business? Okay? Or I say, you know, I think I'm going to start walking more. I'm trying to do something about my weight and I want to exercise more. I think I'm going to try to start doing that. And what if your inner roommate says, the only thing I've ever seen you walk toward is the refrigerator and back? Okay. So what if that inner roommate is literally what I say to myself? Okay. And do you do things like that where you say, oh, the boss seemed kind of quiet when I walked in this morning. This is probably the day they think I'm less worthwhile than I usually am, so maybe they're, if we're not careful, we go running with that. And if you had an actual roommate like that, who undermined you regularly, I would hope you'd move out. Or you might step back and introduce them and say, allow me to introduce you to my roommate, so that people wouldn't listen. And Singer says we do this so much in Western culture. We do so many things that are self-critical. My first marriage didn't work out, therefore I'm not capable. This happened, I took a job that didn't work out. Those are instructive. Prefix in, I-N. Those can be instructive. We can learn from previous experience without question, even things we regret. But that's very different from things that are destructive, that are no longer worthwhile. And Singer makes this great point. If we are listening to that inner roommate years after the fact, months after the fact, it's time to dismiss the inner roommate. All right? So I'm not going to call on you, but think about something where you've got that voice talking to you that's no longer serving you well. Okay. The second example is one that I figured out when I was trying to clear off my computer one night. I was just tired of all this stuff that was on there, all these unwanted emails. And I started trying to unsubscribe. And have you ever done that? So you scroll down to the bottom of the thing and you go, all right, unsubscribe. And sometimes you can barely see it. It's like gray lettering with a gray background, So you finally find it and you click on unsubscribe. And then you get a message saying, do you really want to unsubscribe? And you say, yes. And then you get another one that says, if you ever don't want to unsubscribe, a double negative, here's how to get back in. Why don't you paste this in your browser, No, why don't you paste your unsubscribe message somewhere else? I don't need another unsubscribe message. There are things that you and I most likely need to unsubscribe from. When is some set of worries, some set of self-doubt, self-criticism, when do we need to unsubscribe from that? And I will tell you that it takes time to do it. I notice that I am at the point in my age now where I no longer try to eliminate these things. I try to minimize the impact because they tend to come back. There's an expression, when you're under stress, you regress. Okay? When we're under stress, if we're not careful, we regress, we go backwards. I will add to that, when you stress, you regress unless we do something about that. And I find when people are under stress, and I'll certainly put myself in that category, is when I tend to do more of that. I go back to the inner roommate that's no longer serving me well. Okay. Life-giving relationships. Cultivate life-giving relationships. Think about, again, people who have had a tremendous impact on you. And what was it about those people? What were the things that they did for you? What were the things that you learned from them? And here's how to think about it. So I'm going to ask you in a second to name one of those people to somebody at your table. All right? I'll give you a fair warning. The first one from Robert Wicks, he says, people who are prophets. In the Old Testament, the prophets were not people who foretold the future. They were people who criticized their society and criticized their culture for their inattention to the poor, for their inattention to people who needed God's mercy extended through other people, through people to be a healing presence. So they weren't future tellers, fortune tellers, but they would say, we need to change. Okay. So a prophet, in this guy's mind, is someone who challenges you by word or example. So think about somebody who challenges you by their example. Think about people you work with and you think, boy, how does this person stay steady all the time? You know, how come they don't seem to get as rattled as other people? They're challenging you by their example to be different, okay? Or even by their words, you know. Okay, I know we're going to complain. Mary Ann talks about working with a person who, when they would all come in and complain at the start of a shift and start that downward spiral, you know, as people, this day is going to be more sucky than any other day in history, you know. And she said one of her co-workers would say, I'll give everybody 5 minutes to complain, and then we're going to work. And it became kind of a running joke thing, and people laughed about it, but it made them aware of stuff they were doing that was, if it went unchecked, it was really making people circle the drain. Okay? So think about that one. Who's a cheerleader? Who's someone who's wildly enthusiastic about you? It could be a person. It could be a creature. In our house, with our sons up and out, they're off the payroll. They're out of college. They're off the payroll. They're working full-time, going to grad school part-time. All right? And yet, if we're not careful, Mary Ann and I don't make the best use of our time together, even with the kids gone. And the creature who brings me back to reality more often than not is our dog, Louie, who's glad when you come from another room. You know? I mean, you walk from another room and you say, hey, you're here. He's back. Okay? He's back. Wow. Let's do something. You know, let's look at each other. Let me get up here and let you pet my head, you know? And I can come back from a trip like this, and Mary Ann will be like, oh, yeah, you were gone. Yeah, that's right. I'm teasing. But I called her last night when I got here and I said, now, make sure you lock the doors. You know, we're thankfully in a good neighborhood, but you know, she has a knack for like leaving stuff unlocked. And I said, no, you are going to lock the doors, right? And she goes, no, the burglars are in here and we're having some beers and they're just the neatest guys. I mean, we're not, you know. So I need somebody to help me to learn to be enthusiastic, to have people believe in us. One of the people for me was my grandmother, Granny O'Keefe, Gertrude O'Keefe, my mom's mom. And she had this knack for exaggerating what her grandsons did. When I worked at St. Mary's, she came into the ER one time after a fall and told people that, you know, my grandson's an administrator here. I was in the staff development department. My grandson's an administrator. So they started asking, you know, is it so-and-so? Is it so-and-so? All the men in administration. So they call me and say, well, you know, your granny's here. She's okay. Got a fractured wrist, but, you know, she wanted you to come up and say hi. And so I get up there and the physician in the ED says, all right, did they make you an administrator at St. Mary's? And if they did, I'm leaving. I'm leaving St. Mary's right now. So, and she would exaggerate that about the other kids, you know, just that level of pride where they're so enthusiastic about us. All right, so be thinking about it. Who is somebody who is enthusiastic about you, despite your limitations? The harasser, a little different title, but someone who gets you to take yourself less seriously. It's ironic that I'm teaching this stuff because I'm not good at all this. I want to make sure I tell you that. I wrestle with this stuff. Yes, please.
I just have a question with a harasser. You don't think about taking yourself less serious. Because I would have thought that they make you
more serious, right? Yeah, so that's a good point. And he uses that term differently in his book. He says they kind of harass you in a good sense. They provoke you. The example that came for me, I'm glad you raised the question. Mary Ann is a harasser for me. She's an awesome wife. I make her sound horrible, but she's awesome. And here's an example. When I am at my worst, I am more worrisome. And I can go through periods like where I might wake up at night for 3 or 4 nights in a row. And if I'm not careful, then I start on that downward spiral. When you stress, you regress and start, oh, I'll be terrible tomorrow. I'll be in some meeting and some big shot will call on me and I won't know anything, and they'll think, why'd we hire him in the first place? And that kind of thing that's not constructive, it's destructive. It's not even instructive. Okay? Or I can be that way. And Mary Ann has been through life-threatening illness and has learned what matters and what hasn't. And I've only learned it a little bit as her spouse. I wish I got it all the way in, but I don't. And so sometimes when we do anything, like decide to remodel the kitchen, or that we need a new car, this car's had it, I can start the worry mechanism, And she'll say stuff like, Don, there's one little shred over there you haven't worried about. It's like this big. Go get that little shred and just worry that sucker to death. Come on, worry more. Okay, now, that's kind of being a harasser, okay? But, whoops, she's a harasser in the good sense. I don't know where that thing went. Did I do anything? Or a reboot? There we go. Whoops, I'll go back. All right, so think about somebody who, in a good way, gets you to take yourself less seriously. It can be stuff like, come on, lighten up, I'm glad you said that. It's not a mean-spirited harasser, it's a boost. The last one, a guide. Someone who listens. Okay? Helps you to act with intention. One of my best pals over the years is a guy who sat with me when I was told to get my family there for Mary Ann. He just sat next to me and let me cry and say what I was worried about. Okay? He's a guide. He's one of the least talkative people I know. And he listens. He's a great listener. And then periodically he will say something where you think, wow, I should shut up more and let you talk more. All right? Making sense? What I want you to do, so you don't listen to me the whole time, pick somebody, please, from one of those columns and tell 1 or 2 people next to you, who did you pick and why did you pick them? Does that sound okay? I can tell you are wildly enthusiastic about this. Your enthusiasm for it is palpable. I can tell you can't wait to do it. So here you go. Get going. You got about 2 minutes. Go. Who's the person? 2 minutes to go. 2 minutes. 2 more minutes. 2 minutes.
The guide one, I was out of I know.
1 minute. 1 minute to go. Thirty seconds. 30 seconds. Talk fast. 30 seconds. All right, here we go. Come on back. right, here we go. No more interacting allowed. No more interacting, I mean it. Not allowed to talk to anybody. All right, think about who came to mind. Show of hands, how many of you had, when you thought about this at first, did you have one person serve more than one of those roles? Just show of hands so we see. So maybe 2 or 3 of those, okay? In the group this morning, one of the people said, you know what, I need to talk to that person more often. You know, not wear them out, but I need to get around that person more. Do you have any observations yourself? There was one other one that came out this morning I want to wait on, but anything from that exercise that struck you? Okay. I would encourage you to make sure you stay in touch with people like that intentionally. Okay, don't always wait till there's a crisis. You know, get around them. Don't wear them out, okay? I would think the other thing that is important is to tell them they are that person for you once in a while. Imagine what would happen if you called somebody up and said, I was in this class with this gray-haired guy today, and he said that we should tell people what roles they fill. Imagine what would happen if you called somebody today and said, you know what, I put you down as a harasser. And don't tell them the definition, just say I put you down as a harasser. But think about what that would do to your relationship. I have told my buddy multiple times that he's a guide for me. And it just makes the relationship better. Just makes it better. Okay? It beats the heck out of people saying stuff to each other like, you know what your problem is? Don't you love hearing that? You know what your problem is? Oh no, why don't you tell me? I've been wondering what it is. Why don't you tell me what it is? You know? Or don't, if it's a loved one, don't you think stuff like, you're no prize yourself? You're not so hot to live with, you know? All right. So think about what would happen if we acted on that. Think about if you told a coworker that. I put you down as my guide. Okay? You're the one who is teaching me how to use the electronic medical record, and you're patient. Your guide. Okay? What would that do to the co-worker relationship? Understand change. This is stuff we're faced with. When's the last time you made a change because you wanted to? Maybe you did. You know, we want a different house, or we want to go on vacation. But a lot of the changes we make are thrust upon us. And this guy, William Bridges, had some really key insights about change. And I'll use a story to teach this. Little Red Riding Hood. I told this story twice so far today, and I've butchered it both times, but I think I've got it right now. Okay. At the beginning of the story, Little Red Riding Hood is going to go see Granny and bring her a basket of goodies because she doesn't feel well, and check on Granny, and gets told, don't talk to strangers on the way. Careful going through the woods to Granny's. So far, so good, right? Okay. Then she gets in the middle and disobeys and talks to the big bad wolf and gets herself in a jam. And at the ending of the story, someone comes along and rescues her, and she learns her lesson. She takes that moral lesson that you should always listen to your elders. William Bridges says, when change happens to us, it does not happen this way. It happens the other way, that the ending comes first. So when a patient gets a diagnosis, there's an ending of their belief that they may have held, unconsciously or otherwise, the belief that I'll never have to contend with illness till I'm really old. Okay? When someone says, I don't want to be in this marriage anymore, it's an ending first. All right? And all that comes with it. The sorrow, the brokenness, the anger, the resentment. So think about a change, even on simple levels. We don't have enough hours for you on day shift, but if you work 2 evening shifts, I can guarantee you X hours. That could be a simple ending. Like I don't get to work with Catherine anymore, and I loved working with her, and now I don't get to see her every week. So the ending comes first. It helps understand why we resist, because an ending is occurring. I think he's really got it. I really like what he says about this. And he said, then if you do your work in the middle, okay, when we had kids, when we had babies, and our boys were 15 months apart, when we had babies, that was the ending of sleep as I knew it. There was a pregnant woman in the class this morning, and I'm blabbing about this, and I thought, wow, she's like ready to have a kid, and I'm going on about it. But I remember walking Tim, our oldest son. He was a colicky little guy, and it was in the summertime, and he was so little that I had his tummy on my arm, like, his head kind of up by my elbow, and walking him outside. And I saw the glow of this cigar across the street from Mr. Peters. And he just pulls that cigar out and goes, boy, if you think you don't sleep now, you ain't sleeping for 20 years. Puts it back in. Okay? He was waiting up for one of his kids at 2:30 in the morning. And whenever you're sleep deprived, I wanted to cry. And I was like, I'm never going to sleep again. Mr. Peters said I'm never going to sleep. I'm done for, okay? Well, there was an ending of that. And yet, did my middle work, and I actually started enjoying bonding with a kiddo, and when Tim started sleeping through the night, I missed it. Now, I know that's kind of goofy, bless you, but I missed it. It was a different change. I was glad to sleep again. Okay, then they go off to college and come home from college, and they go out when you're going to bed and all that kind of stuff. All right, but there are endings, and some of them are sad, and some of them are necessary. And what do we do with it? Instead of mope and stay stuck on it, what can I do in the middle? What do I need to do to work on it? And if we do, there's a new beginning. I don't want to harp on Mary Ann's illness too much. I think she'd be embarrassed by it because she's done so well. I'm so grateful that she's okay. But when that happened, there was an ending to my certainty about what mattered in life. And as a result, I don't compare stuff anymore. Is my house as big as my siblings' house? Or it changed me for the good. It was a good ending, even though it was a scary ending. Does that make sense to you all? When our kids went away to college, it was an interesting ending, When we dropped Andy off, our second son at college, he said, Dad, just give me a big hug and start crying and get it over with. Because I knew they would be back periodically, but there was that sense, too, that they will be with us less. And there was an ending to that. All right? So, is that clicking? All right. This one I wanted to put up, and I'm going to talk about my pal back in Oklahoma City, the guy in the hospital. This guy, Alan Deutschman, says, we often try to change, and this I think will make some sense for us, I hope. When we're at our worst, we look at it like we'll change out of fear or facts or force. Here's an example. If I'm trying to get someone to stop smoking, and I say from a standpoint of fear, you know what, you better stop. This stuff's not good for you. You could really get sick, and you could have this happen, and blah, 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 blah. How can that person counter what I just said? What could that person say to me to shut down the fear stuff? Anybody? How would they counter it? Have you ever dealt with somebody that you're trying to get them to change their behavior? What do they say? You're going to say it.
My husband said, we're all going to die anyway.
We're all going to die anyway. Good. Why don't you mind your own business? You're not so hot yourself. Okay? So the fear stuff doesn't tend to work. Or my uncle smoked till he was 102 and he drank a quart of scotch every day and all that exaggeration stuff and lived really long. And then we come back with the facts. The facts are this. People who smoke, this happens, and then this, and this progression. And they'll come back with their own set of facts that say, well, I've seen something opposite of that happen. And then we try force. If you don't stop, I'm moving out. Good. I've been waiting for you to move out. I was hoping. In fact, I'm going to go get 2 more cartons right now and just fire these babies up while you're packing. This tends not to work. And Deutschman in his research said, think about what people relate to. Let's go back to the guy in Oklahoma City. Okay? Why did he want the new hip? Why did he want somebody to open up his bottom and saw out the old bone and put in some new stuff? What was the reason why he wanted to do it? Dance with his daughter. Okay, wants to be at his wife's grave. He wants to connect. He wants to give his daughter away. Okay, the things we live for. We live for that. Okay? Some of the most emotional things are stuff like that when people say, when my dad gave me away, when my uncle gave me away. Okay? So he's got something he relates to. He's got his reason for being. He's got something that makes him go forward through difficulty. So he relates. He's not going to do it out of fear. If we tell him, hey, we're going to ambulate you when this is over, remember what that means to that guy? Think he's going to do it? No. But he'll do it when he finds his reason. Down here, then he reframes. You know, when you relate to what you want to do, then you can reframe it. So he reframes it like, I'm going to rehab so I can meet that goal. You know, somebody who wants to go back to school. I was listening to a person I had tapes on in the car on the way up, and this person was talking about listening to a person who said, I want to go back to school and be a social worker, but I'm 40 years old, and if it takes 3 years, I'll be 43 when I'm done. And this person said, I asked her, how old will you be when you don't go back to school? Won't you still be 43 in 3 years? Okay, trying to like break into her mentality and say, you're still going to be 43. Why don't you be one with your social work degree? Be 43 with that, instead of 43 with regret. So again, she's beginning to help that person relate and reframe her thinking. So this guy who's going through rehab and learning to walk with his walker and get up off a commode, sit with a cushion, lie with a cushion between his legs, all those things he's got to do to overcome that and integrate that surgery, he can do it because he's reframed it. And Deutschman says if you repeat that enough, it becomes a new way of doing change. It's no longer a burdensome change, it's a change with a purpose. All right. We all right so far? Okay. I know I'm throwing a lot at you and I'm going fast. But these are just things, and I got a couple more things to click off that I'm trying to make really memorable. Okay? All right? We're in the home stretch. I love this one. I'm going to tell a story about this to convey it. What if I had come in today and said, you know what, I'm actually not doing this presentation? Something really cool happened. Right before Sister Mary Jean went on to be board chair and Bill Thompson became president, you know, they went out and took some of our assets and they bought Powerball tickets. And they didn't build, they took some money was supposed to be for Janesville or supposed to be, and they bought these Powerball tickets and SSM won. And they told me today that we don't have to do this class, and instead we're all going on a cruise. And we're not doing a carnival cruise. We're going to go on a cruise today. And I'm in charge of getting us all on the cruise. And you don't have to go with any of your loser relatives or anything. We're all going to get on a bus and go to Dane County Airport. We've got money for you to buy swimming suits, and you don't even bring your Hawaiian garb for tomorrow. We'll buy you Hawaiian stuff. We're going on this big old party on this cruise. Get out there on that bus, people. This ain't no class. We're gone. And we're like wildly enthusiastic. And we get outside and get on that bus, get on the airplane, go to Miami after going through like 6 other cities to get there. We get to Miami, we get on that ship and we get out and that baby starts taking on water. And we get told to get in the lifeboats. And somebody in one of our lifeboats says, I knew this was going to happen. This always happens to me. I have a cloud over me. I have this like stamped on me. I always get hosed. I never have anything go the way I want to. In fact, this is how SSM's going to thin out the herd. They're going to put everybody on these ships and sink these suckers. It's a sinister plan. It's a big lie. There wasn't any Powerball tickets all along. I always get shafted. Okay? I'm doing pretty good at that. I'm good at getting like outraged. Victim. This person, if you think about it or write it in there, this person has no hope. I'm a victim of the way I was raised. I'm a victim of these circumstances. I'm a victim of that relationship. I'm a victim of a decision I should have made. The victim has no hope. The second person says, hey, you know what? I used to watch Survivor Island on TV. And I've been watching The Great Race, you know, and these people figure stuff out. I mean, come on, man. There might be something really cool, like maybe the sun will go in and we won't get scorched. Maybe the currents will change. Maybe those are dolphins swimming around the ship. okay, around our little watercrafts, you know? Something's bound to happen. Maybe if we just like sang together or something, you know? Probably we'd just all feel better, and somehow the boats would just start drifting towards shore, and we'd probably go to some like really cool island with treasure on it and stuff, and we'd be better off than we were before we left, okay? This person is a survivor, and they have hope. They have hope. The last group of us start to say, who can swim well enough that you can go over the side of these rafts and start to help us kick and get us where we need to go? Who of you are comfortable taking some of your clothing and help us make a little shield from the sun that we can put over the top of us? Is anyone in here a Cliff Clavin, fountainhead of useless knowledge, who can tell us about the stars and about the currents? And Don's the only one, so get him in our raft, okay? Is there anybody that it doesn't swim well but can lean outside of the raft, watch outside, far fins, and pull people in when those get near, unless you don't like the person next to the fins, okay? All right? That person is a navigator because, bless you, they have hope and a plan. A navigator has hope and a plan. For some years, I tutored people in St. Louis, volunteered tutoring for their high school equivalency degree. All men, all ex-offenders in the court system in the city of St. Louis. And the motivation levels vary because some of them are just really trying to get, out from under their probation officer, sometimes get back in trouble and have to go back in and so forth. But many of them have levels of motivation that once you tap them, and once I help them look for a plan. I have the one person who was tremendously successful happens to be a minority person, who when I told him about minority grants in the trades, and if you could get your high school equivalency degree, we can apply for this grant that's directed toward minority people to help them learn how to do HVAC, heating and refrigeration, know how to do carpentry, know how to do electrical work. It was magic. Suddenly he had a plan instead of just staying out of jail. Okay? And that's not something where I've had a lot of success. But I think once I started changing my thinking away from just having him survive, okay, or just listening to him talk about how he got shafted and so forth, instead trying to steer him, not lecture him, but steer him, it made a tremendous change because he had more of a navigator perspective. And he's done remarkably well, and he tutors at the center now. Okay? He has come full circle because he's a navigator. And I would guess some of the people you love working with, maybe the person you fell in love with, maybe the person you call on the phone when you're struggling, that person is more than likely a navigator. And they haven't had it always easy. They've learned to navigate. All right, we're almost there. This one I love. This is called the gratitude exercise. I actually use this. I started doing this 8 years ago for Lent. And I taped this and put it on the mirror. My mirror in the bathroom, because that's where I typically start out and end, shaving, brushing teeth, end of the day, and so forth. And kept it there until I could commit it. And it actually is a wonderful way to go to sleep. What am I grateful for in this moment? And what did I do to deserve the blessing? And frequently the answer is nothing. May have biologically contributed to having the kids that I feel grateful for. Could have adopted children, I'm grateful Marianne accepted my proposal. When I made my proposal, I was so nervous for like the days leading up to it that she thought, we almost had an argument because she thought I was detached. And I was just nervous. And I finally blurted it out over a pizza after a Blues hockey game. And I sounded like Rocky Balboa, like, hey, Marianne, you're going to get married? We've been going out and stuff, and, And thank heaven she said yes. Okay? On a given day, driving up here through Illinois, I'm much more aware because of these gratitude exercises. What's going on under that farmland in Illinois and in Wisconsin? There's stuff going on underneath that snow that's going to burst. The farmers are getting what they need. We had terrible drought last year in Missouri and southern Illinois. Okay? There's a lot that's a metaphor for life. There's tons of stuff going on underneath us that's waiting to come out. Talents we have, outlooks we have, and gifts we have that are waiting to be unleashed. And the gratitude exercise, I am grateful the more I do this for simpler things. I'm grateful that I breathe through the night without having to worry about breath, that my body works okay. I'm grateful that my wife is sleeping there. I'm grateful that I have my mom still. I'm grateful that I have time with friends. I'm grateful for our sons. I'm grateful for a roof over my head. I'm grateful for a meal in front of me. I'm much more grateful because I practice this, and it reduces anxiety remarkably. And sometimes we have done nothing. I mean, it might be, well, I went back to school and got another degree and it helped us earn more money and we got a neater house or we got to go on vacation. Absolutely. You may have had a lot to do with that. But when I look at my own life, I think about people who helped me pay for my education, people who tutored me in school in subjects that I struggled with. Very simple blessings. Does that click? Before I finish up, think about something. Do this exercise right now. I'm not going to call on you, but what's a blessing that you are very mindful of right now? And what did you do to deserve that blessing? All right? Almost there. Did you ever hear, I love this story, peanut butter story. It's in a couple different journals, but this guy goes to work on a construction crew, and he's eating lunch with all the rest of the group. These kind of traditional guys all sit down, open the lunch boxes, sitting on girders and boxes and all that stuff. And this guy opens his lunch box and says, "Ugh, peanut butter again." And he proceeds to wolf his sandwich down. Does it the second day, the third. After about 6 weeks of working together, every day at lunch, with all of his work pals, this guy goes, "Peanut butter again." Finally, the one guy goes, "Man, I've been working with you for 6 weeks. You do this every day at lunch. If you don't like peanut butter, why don't you ask your wife to make something else for you for lunch?" And he says, "I'm not married. I make these sandwiches myself." If you and I don't know what we want, we're going to get peanut butter over and over again. Isn't that true? If you and I don't know what we want and don't get after it and don't get support to get there, we're going to get peanut butter again. We're going to be going, "God, peanut butter again." Life peanut butter, the peanut butter of life. Okay? William Perry, not William Refrigerator Perry, the football guy, but William Perry, who was a Harvard psychologist, trained therapist. And in one of his books, he said, "When a person comes to me for therapy, I listen and I ask myself, what does this person really want? What do they really want? Do they want a better relationship? Do they want to get over a broken relationship? Do they want the courage to look for a new job? Are they sad and are they grieving? What does the person really want? And then I ask myself, what will they do to keep from getting it? What does this person really want? And what will they do to keep from getting it? It's pretty profound because it helped him understand why somebody could come into a therapist's office and say, "I want help with this, I feel lost about this," and then resist the steps. Okay? They want peanut butter again. All right. In wrapping up, I have to do this one more time today. I get to do it. I shouldn't say half. That sounds terrible. I get to do it again. Just for my purposes for the last group, what is something that you're thinking about now that you weren't thinking about when you came in here 1 hour ago? Anybody? Just helps me know, what are you learning? What's something to maybe emphasize? I know somebody's going to have to pipe up and say so, but think about it. Before you came in here thinking I can blow off an hour and get out of work for an hour or something like that, what is something you're thinking about now that you weren't thinking about or considering 1 hour ago? Will anybody, 1 or 2 or 3 of you tell us, please? I'd love to know. Yes, please. Yeah. Thank you. Gratitude. And I fall off that wagon a lot, even though I practice it. but I practice it with more attentiveness sometimes than others. So it's really helped me be far more grateful, really profound. It's a profound spiritual experience to do this exercise. It really is. Print it off and tape it to your mirror. Anybody else? Yes, please.
My inner roommate, it's quite negative.
Yeah. Yeah, the inner roommate. It's time to evict the inner roommate. I'm telling you, that can be really... When I first read that, I thought, boy, oh boy. And if that were another person, I'd say, I don't think I'm going to hang out with that person. I would. I'm not hanging out. He just wears me out. I don't need it. I'm doing enough of a number on myself. Anything else before we stop? Okay? Yes, please.
Appreciate those people you recognize for supporting you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's amazing how awkward it is and how profound it is. I promise this will be my last story. My wife tells me to number my stories to save time. You're like, number 47. Oh. Number, Once again, what a terrible person. But my dad, one of the profound changes in my relationship with my dad was not only his coming to grips with alcoholism and having to do an intervention with my father. It was a very profound thing. It was a mixture of sadness and discovery and anger and just a ton of things. But in the latter years of my dad's life, probably the last 15 years, here's how it started out. I would leave my dad and say, Dad, I'll see you, I love you. And my dad would respond by saying, I know. Okay, very uncomfortable with it. I know. I know. Okay. And as time went by, my dad would initiate that. I'll see you, son, I love you. In my dad's final days, the last two things he said, as he was in and out of consciousness, he would get this list. And he was a list maker, and he was very worried about my mom. And make sure you do this. Make sure you clean the gutters on the west side of the house more than the east side. There's money in the basement for Mom. Go get that money until my life insurance kicks in. I want your brothers to have my tools from the workroom. And Don, you have no use for them. Some of the final words, Hope I didn't hurt your feelings, son. Oh, no, Dad, not at all. Can I have like one screwdriver or one hammer? Okay. And the one day he said, bring this over, and he had me write down stuff, and I had to show him, okay, I'll get the money out of the basement for Mom. I'll give the tools to my weasel brothers, and I can't have any, I understand that. And then he said, write one more thing down. You are a wonderful son. It's profound. Unbelievable. What a profound journey to be there with my dad. You are a wonderful son. Okay. And so that stuff's profoundly available to us, even though it's awkward. If you go up to somebody today and go, hey, I wanted to tell you, you're my harasser, they're going to go, did you go to a workshop or something? And the answer is, yes, I did. But I'm telling you, it changes. All right, no remarkable finish to this. I'm out of gas. I really appreciate you taking your time with me today. I really do. Give yourselves a hand. Great job. Have a good evening.